Let's get started with our first news. Paddy Pimblett thinks Michael Chandler is underestimating him. Pimblett sent a message to Michael Chandler today ahead of their upcoming clash at UFC 314 next month. Feeling underestimated, Paddy dismissed the notion that Chandler will knock him out, confidently stating that Chandler won't even get close to him on the feet. He made it clear he has every intention of standing and trading with Chandler, showing the world that he is more than ready for this challenge. Pimblett also mentioned how nice it was to size Chandler up in person, emphasizing the noticeable size difference between the two. He said, "A lot of people were surprised at how much bigger I am than him. I knew I was going to be that much bigger than him. I'm going to show everyone that the old guard is on the way out and the new guard is coming in." Paddy is brimming with confidence, believing that this is his moment to make a statement and solidify himself as a top-tier lightweight contender. He further doubled down on his belief that Chandler is making a massive mistake by underestimating him. Paddy added, "Funny, everyone's saying he's going to knock me out. I don't think he's even going to get near me on the feet. Everyone thinks Mike's just going to come out and knock me out cold, and I won't stand with him, just like everyone thought I wouldn't stand with Bobby Green. But my striking has gotten so much better since the Bobby Green fight. He's underestimating me." Paddy believes that Chandler is preparing for the wrong fight and that he isn't taking into account how much Pimblett has evolved. He continued, "I think he thinks he's fighting the same Paddy from back then. It's a completely different fight now. I've evolved. My movement is better, my striking is sharper, my timing is on point, and my fight IQ has gone through the roof. I'm not the same fighter who fought Bobby Green or the guys before him. This is a new version of me, and I'm coming to prove it." Paddy also addressed the critics who claim he's taking too big of a step up in competition by facing a dangerous veteran like Chandler. He remains unfazed, stating that this is exactly the kind of fight he wants to silence the doubters once and for all. "People keep doubting me, saying I'm not ready for this level. Well, let's see what they say after I win this fight. They'll have to respect me then." So what do you think? Is Chandler truly underestimating Paddy? Or is Paddy in for a rude awakening at UFC 314? Moving on to the second news, Joe Rogan reacts to Alex Pereira versus Magomed-Ankalaev. Joe Rogan's reaction to Alex Pereira versus Magomed-Ankalaev. Not everyone was left buzzing from the UFC 313 headliner earlier this month. And before we continue, make sure to leave a like on the video to help support the channel further. Since Alex Pereira's loss, there's been a ton of talk about whether the UFC has a problem now with boring champions. But the way Joe Rogan sees it, not only was the fight entertaining, Magomed-Ankalaev showcased that he's a force to be reckoned with, and then some. Long before Ankalaev was officially booked to fight Pereira, many fans and pundits argued that the UFC was deliberately avoiding the matchup out of fear that Ankalaev would end Pereira's reign. After all, over the last couple of years, Pereira has become one of the sport's top draws by bombing out multiple opponents. Winning 2 titles during that time hasn't hurt either. During a recent episode of Joe Rogan's podcast, he proceeded to outline why he was thoroughly entertained by Ankalaev's performance. Rogan said, "We were just talking about how exciting the Ankalaev and Pereira fight was, even though people didn't like it because it wasn't some crazy result or a giant knockout like you get in most Pereira fights. But it was so technical, and Ankalaev just did a fantastic job of shutting down the scariest guy in the division. What was so interesting was the consequences of exchanging with Pereira are so high, but also Ankalaev has knocked out a lot of people. We always look at Pereira's knockouts, but Ankalaev has knocked out some of the best guys in the division. He's only lost one time, and that was to Paul Craig, who has the nastiest triangle. It's so sneaky and so quick, and you don't expect it. He's so high level off his back, and he caught him with like 1 second to go in the 3rd round of a fight that he was losing. Most people don't want to be on their back, so they don't even practice off their back. The common thought amongst coaches is, when you're on your back with 2 minutes to go, you're probably not going to pull a submission off. You've got to concentrate on getting back up to your feet, minimizing whatever scoring your opponent has done while taking you down, and whatever shots they've landed. Mitigate those as much as possible and get to the feet as quickly as possible. That's what everybody's trying to do now. No one can deny that Ankalaev is an extremely well-rounded and talented fighter. We're talking about a guy who's lost just once, and that was 7 years ago. It's also true that Ankalaev has has recorded some noteworthy finishes, but he's also been involved in some fights that prompted more yawns than cheers. But what do you make of Ankalaev? Do you see him beating Pereira for a second time if the UFC books an immediate rematch, as most expect? Now, let's move on to another major news story. Dana White gets warned by a top boxing promoter. Following the announcement that Dana White is finally stepping into the boxing world, one of the sport's most respected and established promoters has sent a clear message. This won't be an easy ride for the UFC boss. If you've been following Dana White for years, you already know that he has long expressed interest in promoting professional boxing. However, at the same time, he has been extremely vocal about his disdain for how the boxing industry operates. He has repeatedly criticized the business side of the sport, calling it disorganized and corrupt. Now, after years of speculation, White is officially making his move. It was recently announced that he has partnered with Saudi Arabia's Turki Al-Sheikh to launch a brand new boxing promotion called TKO Boxing. According to White and his team, this new company will shake up the sport in a big way. TKO Boxing aims to operate more like the UFC, meaning a league-style structure rather than the current fragmented promotional system seen in boxing today. This approach could be a game changer, but not everyone is convinced that White can pull it off. One of the biggest names in boxing promotion, Eddie Hearn, the chairman of Matchroom Sport, recently shared his thoughts on White's new endeavor. During an interview with IFL TV, Hearn didn't mince words when talking about the realities of boxing promotion. He made it clear that Dana White is stepping into an entirely different battlefield compared to MMA. Hearn said, "Boxing is the worst business in the world. I hope these guys have got the appetite to be up all night and sleep with one eye open every single day, because you're not going to get control where you can get to bed at 10 at night and wake up at 8 in the morning and expect the industry and your situation to be exactly the same. It doesn't work like that. Everyone is out there hustling every single day. Guess what? I'm one of them." These comments from Hearn raise an important question. Is White fully prepared for the challenges ahead? While he has spoken at length about boxing's flaws, the biggest test may come when TKO Boxing tries to implement a UFC-style compensation model, which differs significantly from how revenue is typically split in big boxing matches. What do you think? Can Dana White and TKO Boxing succeed? Will they dominate boxing the way the UFC has dominated MMA? Next up, Daniel Cormier talks about the lightweight division. Recently, Daniel Cormier weighed in on the state of the UFC's lightweight division and what scraps he would like to see next. But at the same time, Cormier is warning Islam Makhachev that he may be in a can't-win situation if and when he faces Topuria. Following UFC 313 and Justin Gaethje's memorable win over Rafael Fiziev, there's been a lot of talk regarding what could come next for the longtime contender. On one hand, a lot of people want to see him battle Makhachev, but it looks like he'll need to wait on that, since the belief is that Topuria will be next for the lightweight king. So during a recent video that went up on Cormier's YouTube channel, he proposed these matchups. Here's what I would suggest. I'm not a matchmaker. Topuria versus Islam Makhachev. Yes, book it. Gaethje versus Charles Oliveira. Book it. Whoever wins fights Makhachev. That's it. Right there. Topuria gets the shot. Oliveira and Gaethje, the winner gets the title fight. Oliveira, go down to New Orleans, fight Dustin Poirier. If you win again, you're next after that guy. There it is. That's it. What do you think of Cormier's proposal here? In terms of timing, it seems like a pretty good plan, right? And do you see Gaethje getting past Oliveira? As noted, Cormier also outlined why he believes Makhachev could have his record scrutinized if he fights and beats Topuria. Cormier said, for Makhachev, if he goes and beats Topuria, people will say he beat Volkanovski, he beat Topuria, Charles Oliveira, and Dan Hooker. That's 5 title fight wins. But in that, they would say, well, he defended the belt 3 times against featherweights. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you do or how high you hold someone. The fact that he was the champion in a lower weight class is what's going to be pointed to the moment Islam beats him. It's an interesting point, and Makhachev has also alluded to this as why he's not really interested in fighting Topuria. Makhachev has already beaten Alexander Volkanovski twice, so in his eyes, a win over Topuria won't do much in comparison to, say, winning the welterweight title. All that aside, signs that the UFC is moving forward with Makhachev versus Topuria continue to stack up. In a recent live stream, Razu Chudanov, who is a close friend of Khamzat Chimaev, reported that Makhachev versus Topuria and Dricus du Plessis versus Robert Whittaker are being targeted for UFC 317 in June. Since then, Roman Dolidze also relayed that he's learned that du Plessis versus Whittaker is a done deal. So if any of this is true, Now let's move on to another news story. The MMA community roasts Jon Jones's new look. Jon Jones recently took to social media to unveil a brand new haircut, and let's just say, it did not go over well with the MMA community. The new hairstyle appears to be inspired by Avatar: The Last Airbender, a popular animated series. While Jones probably thought his fresh look would be a fun way to mix things up, fans and fighters alike had a different reaction. Instead of praising his new style, the MMA world took the opportunity to absolutely roast him, both for the haircut and for continuing to avoid a fight with Tom Aspinall. It didn't take long for fans to flood social media with memes and jokes about Jones's latest transformation. Alongside the roasting of his haircut, many people took the chance to criticize him for not stepping into the octagon to defend his heavyweight title. Ever since winning the belt, Jones has been sidelined with an injury, and fans are getting impatient, especially as Aspinall, the interim champ, waits for his shot. Here are some of the best reactions from the MMA community. He's doing everything other than fighting Aspinall. That's interesting. But when the MMA world needed him most, he vanished. The Last Airbender? More like the Last Belt Defender. At this point, he's running from Aspinall like he's in an episode of the show. He would get called corny for this, even if he was fighting regularly. The fact that he's dodging a fight makes it worse. Bro's haircut looks just like his prison jumpsuit from a year back. So Jon, just checking in. It's been 4 months since you won the belt against, well, nobody, basically. Ready to sign the contract for the clear next in line? Jon, I got a silly haircut and did some weird advertising for an insurance thingy. Imagine if he actually fought like this. The arrow on his head is just pointing in the direction he'll fall when Aspinall knocks him out. Jones has yet to respond to the backlash, but knowing him, he might just laugh it off or fire back at his critics. What do you think about Jon Jones's new haircut? Do you think he should focus more on getting back in the cage rather than changing his style? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Finally, let's move on to another news story. UFC fighters offer to step in for Michael Chandler versus Paddy Pimblett. First up, as this video is being produced, Michael Chandler versus Paddy Pimblett is still a go, so if you've been waiting on the edge of your seat for that fight at UFC 314, you can continue to do so. But recently, rising lightweight Mauricio Ruffi let it be known that if either Pimblett or Chandler drops out of the fight, he wants the UFC to give him a call. Via social media, the dangerous lightweight posted this in Portuguese: UFC, I'm ready to face Michael Chandler or Paddy Pimblett if the fight falls through. I'm 100% physically ready. You have my number, just call. Now, given that Ruffi is not a top 15 ranked lightweight yet, you've got to wonder if he would be the first person the UFC calls. That said, he is coming off a jaw-dropping highlight reel knockout of Clay Guida at UFC 313. Do you want to see Ruffi throw hands with either Pimblett or Chandler? Another fighter who's more than willing to step in to face Pimblett if the need arises is Jared Gordon. If you remember, Gordon fought Pimblett back in December 2022 and lost via unanimous decision, but a lot of folks had the fight scored for Gordon. So, while appearing on the Home of Fight podcast recently, Gordon relayed the following when asked about the possibility of fighting at UFC 314. You want to make up that real quick? Told April, Miami, I assume. I doubt it unless my teammate Chandler falls off the card and I get my rematch with Paddy. I've been manifesting it. No offense to Mike, he's my buddy, and that's how opportunities come about, and you have to seize the moment. So in my mind, I'm like, yeah, of course I want it to happen, but I just wanted to, for some reason, have like an emergency and pull off the card, and I'm right here. I'm walking around like 171, 172. I can make weight on 4 or 5 days notice. 3 days, you're just ready.